I never imagined my life would change so dramatically in Silicon Valley. My name is Sarah Mackenzie, and at 35, I thought I had everything figured out. I was wrong. Growing up in Scotland before moving to America at 12, I'd always been drawn to the mountains. They reminded me of home, of the highland peaks I'd left behind. That's probably why I ended up as a professional skier, even making it to the Olympics. But life has a way of throwing you curveballs, and mine came in the form of a knee injury that ended my competitive career. So I did what any resourceful Scottish American would do. I built a new life. I opened Mackenzie Lodge in Aspen, turning my passion for skiing into a successful business. The lodge became my everything, my home, my work, my identity. I thought that was enough, until I met him. It was a crisp December morning when Nathan Anderson walked into my coffee shop. I remember exactly what he was wearing: a slightly wrinkled Patagonia jacket and well-worn hiking boots. He looked lost, but not in the usual tourist way. There was something deeper in his eyes, a kind of purposeful wandering. "Just a black coffee, please," he said, pulling out his MacBook Pro. I noticed he wasn't wearing a wedding ring, but there was a tan line where one used to be. Another Silicon Valley refugee, I thought. We've been getting more of them lately, tech workers fleeing the Bay Area's pressure cooker for the mountain air. But something about him was different. He sat there for hours, typing away, occasionally looking up at the snow-capped peaks through our panoramic windows. I found myself making excuses to walk past his table, refreshing his coffee more times than necessary. Writing the next great American novel? I finally asked, during one of my coffee rounds. He looked up, surprised, as if he'd forgotten where he was. "More like a confession," he said with a slight smile. "Must be quite the story," I replied, noticing the word count on his screen, over 10,000 words already. "It's called My Wife's Affair Made Me Rich," he said, then immediately looked embarrassed. "That's quite a title," I managed, trying not to show my interest too obviously. "It's not what you think," he quickly added. "It's about finding yourself when everything falls apart." I pulled up a chair, my coffee pot forgotten on the counter. "I've got time," I said. And that's how I heard Nathan Anderson's story. He told me about finding his wife Ashley with the ER doctor in their Peloton room. About how instead of confronting them, he'd simply walked away. How he'd methodically dismantled his old life, piece by piece. "Most people would have thrown things, screamed, made a scene," I said. "I thought about it," he admitted. "But then I realized this was my chance." "Your chance?" "To stop living someone else's life." As he spoke, I found myself drawn in not just by his story, but by the way he told it. There was no bitterness, no rage, just a quiet determination to transform pain into purpose. He told me about his kids Tyler and Madison. About how they'd been lost in their own digital worlds. How his son was addicted to gaming and his daughter obsessed with social media fame. "They're good kids," he said, "just disconnected." I understood that disconnect all too well. In my lodge, I'd seen countless families glued to their phones instead of enjoying the mountains. As Nathan talked, the coffee shop slowly emptied. The afternoon light painted the mountains gold, then pink, then purple. Still, we sat there, trading stories. I told him about my Olympic dreams, shattered by a bad landing on an icy slope. He told me about his dream of writing, buried under years of coding. "Why Aspen?" I finally asked. "Honestly? I just followed the road," he said. "But something about these mountains. They have a way of calling to people," I finished. He nodded, understanding perfectly. By closing time, I felt like I'd known him for years. There was an ease to our conversation, a natural flow I hadn't experienced in a long time. "I should probably find a hotel," he said, looking at his watch in surprise. "The lodge," I blurted out before I could stop myself. "My lodge? We have rooms." He smiled, and something fluttered in my chest. "Lead the way, Ms. Mackenzie." That night, showing him to his room, I felt a spark of possibility. Not just romance, though there was definitely an attraction there. But something bigger, like the universe had aligned to bring two lost souls together. As I lay in bed that night, I couldn't stop thinking about Nathan's story. About how sometimes the worst moments in our lives can lead us exactly where we need to be. I thought about my own journey from Olympic hopeful to lodge owner. How my injury had seemed like the end of the world. But it had led me here, to this life I'd built. To this moment. The next morning, I found Nathan in the coffee shop again. He'd already ordered 2 coffees, one for each of us. "I hope you don't mind," he said. "I remembered how you take yours. Black with a splash of cream, no sugar." It was a small thing, but it showed he'd been paying attention. Over the next few days, we fell into a routine. He'd write in the coffee shop, and I'd run the lodge. But we'd find moments to talk over coffee, during lunch breaks, in the quiet evenings. He told me more about his life in Silicon Valley. About the $1.2 million house that never felt like home. The Tesla he'd traded for a Jeep Wrangler. The way his wife had slowly drifted away, seduced by the artificial glamour of their lifestyle. "I think we both got lost," he said one evening, as we watched the sunset from the lodge's deck. "In different ways, but lost all the same." I understood that feeling. After my injury, I'd felt lost too. Adrift in a world that suddenly didn't make sense. "But you found yourself," he said, looking at my lodge with admiration. "You built something real here." His words warmed me more than the whiskey we were sharing. Because he got it, the value of building something authentic. Something that wasn't about impressing others or maintaining appearances. One evening, about a week after he'd arrived, I offered to teach him to ski. "Fair warning," he said, "I'm terrible." "Everyone's terrible at first," I laughed. "Even Olympians." We started early the next morning, before the slopes got crowded. I showed him the basics: how to stand, how to stop, how to turn. He was a quick learner, focused and determined. But what struck me most was his willingness to fail. To fall down and get back up, again and again. "You know," he said during a break, "I never would have done this before." "Done what?" "Tried something new, something I might be bad at." "What changed?" "Everything," he said simply. "When your whole life falls apart, being bad at skiing doesn't seem so scary anymore." I understood that too. How sometimes we need to lose everything to find the courage to truly live. As we rode the lift back up, snowflakes starting to fall around us, I realized something. I was falling for Nathan Anderson. Not just because he was handsome, though he was. Not just because he was kind, though that mattered. But because he was real. In a world of carefully curated social media posts and artificial connections, he was genuinely himself. A man who'd turned betrayal into opportunity. Who'd chosen growth over bitterness. Adventure over security. That night, over dinner at my favorite local restaurant, he asked about my own relationships. There was someone, I admitted. Another skier. We trained together, competed together. What happened? After my injury, he couldn't handle it. The fact that I wasn't an athlete anymore. His loss, Nathan said, with such conviction that I believed him. We talked late into the night about our pasts, our dreams, our fears. About how hard it is to be authentic in a world that rewards pretense. About the courage it takes to start over. As we walked back to the lodge, snow crunching under our boots, Nathan stopped suddenly. "Sarah," he said, "I need to be honest about something." My heart skipped a beat. "I'm not just passing through," he continued. "I've been looking for a place to call home." "And?" I asked, hardly daring to breathe. "I think I've found it." He wasn't just talking about Aspen. We both knew that. That night, standing in the snow outside my lodge, Nathan Anderson kissed me. It wasn't a passionate kiss from a romance novel. It was gentle, questioning, full of possibility. When we broke apart, snowflakes catching in his eyelashes, I knew. This was just the beginning of our story. But what a beginning it was. The next few weeks passed in a blur of ski lessons, coffee shop conversations, and deepening connection. Nathan continued writing his story, but now I was becoming part of it. We talked about his kids, about how to help them find their way back to reality. About his upcoming divorce, and the complications that came with it. About my dreams for the lodge, and his hopes for his writing. Slowly, carefully, we were building something together. Something real. Something that didn't need filters or validation from others. Just two people who'd found each other in the mountains. Who'd discovered that sometimes, life's biggest setbacks can lead to its greatest gifts. And as I watched Nathan grow more confident on the slopes, more settled in his new life, I realized something else. Sometimes love isn't about grand gestures or perfect moments. Sometimes it's about finding someone who makes you feel brave enough to be yourself. Someone who sees your scars, physical and emotional, and loves you not despite them, but because of them. Because they tell the story of who you've become. That's what I found in Nathan Anderson. A man who'd turned his pain into purpose. Who'd chosen authenticity over appearance. Who'd reminded me that it's never too late to start again. And as winter settled over Aspen, painting our world in shades of white and silver, I knew. This was just the first chapter of our story. But what a beautiful chapter it was. Spring came early to Aspen that year, bringing with it unexpected changes. Nathan's book was gaining traction online, his raw honesty striking a chord with readers. His story of escape from Silicon Valley's golden handcuffs resonated deeply. Especially with others trapped in lives that looked perfect on Instagram. But success brought complications we hadn't anticipated. Ashley, his soon-to-be ex-wife, had discovered his viral blog. She wasn't happy about being portrayed as the villain, even though Nathan had changed her name. The lawyers got involved, threatening to delay the divorce. "They can't stop me from telling my story," Nathan said one evening, pacing our deck. "No, they can't," I agreed, watching him with concern. His kids had read it too. Madison, his daughter, had actually reached out first. "Dad," she'd written in a long text, "I get it now. Why you left." It was a start. Tyler was harder to reach, still lost in his gaming world. But even he had shown signs of change after reading his father's words. He'd started streaming less, talking more. Small steps, but steps nonetheless. As for me, I was adjusting to being part of someone else's story. Nathan's readers had started visiting the lodge, hoping to catch a glimpse of us. Some even booked ski lessons, wanting to learn from the Olympic skier who helped heal his heart. It was strange, being seen through others' eyes. But Nathan handled it with grace, protecting our privacy while sharing our truth. You're not just part of my story, he told me one night. You're the best part. Spring brought other changes too. The lodge was busier than ever, thanks partly to Nathan's writing, but also because we'd started offering something different. Digital detox retreats, we called them. Weekend packages where guests surrendered their phones. Learn to ski, to hike, to simply be present in the mountains. It was Nathan's idea, born from his own experience. People need a place to remember who they are, he said. Without filters, without likes, without constant connection. He was right. The retreats filled up months in advance. People hungry for authenticity in an artificial world. One morning, as we watched the sunrise paint the peaks gold, Nathan received an email that changed everything. A major publisher wanted his book. Not just the blog posts, but the whole story. Including the parts about finding love again. About finding himself in the mountains. They're offering a 6-figure advance, he said, stunned. I hugged him tight, proud beyond words. But part of me worried. More attention meant more scrutiny. More people wanting a piece of our peace. Nathan sensed my concern. Nothing changes between us, he promised. This is just a platform to help others find their way. I believed him. Because that's who Nathan was, someone who turned pain into purpose. Who used his story to light the way for others. The book deal brought Ashley back into our lives, indirectly. Her lawyer demanded to review the manuscript before publication. Claimed it could affect their divorce settlement. Nathan agreed, but stood firm on telling his truth. I'm not angry anymore, he told me. I'm grateful, in a way. Grateful? If she hadn't cheated, I wouldn't be here. Wouldn't have found you. His words warmed my heart, even as spring storms rattled our windows. Madison came to visit during her spring break. A different girl than the one Nathan had described. Less focused on TikTok fame, more present in the moment. She took to skiing naturally, fearless on the slopes. You make Dad happy, she told me one afternoon. Happier than I've ever seen him. Coming from a teenager, it felt like the highest praise. Tyler was harder to reach, but he was trying. He'd started a new Twitch channel, focusing on outdoor adventure games. Small steps toward reality. Nathan spent hours watching his streams, commenting, connecting. Building bridges back to his son. As spring melted into summer, our life fell into a rhythm. Mornings in the coffee shop, Nathan writing while I handled lodge business. Afternoons on the mountains, teaching guests to embrace adventure. Evenings on our deck, planning our future. The lodge was evolving, becoming more than just a ski resort. A sanctuary for people seeking authenticity. A place to disconnect from technology and reconnect with themselves. Nathan's presence changed me too. Made me braver, more willing to share my own story. I started teaching advanced ski classes again. Sharing how my Olympic injury led me here. How sometimes our greatest disappointments lead to unexpected joy. Our love story became part of the lodge's story. Not in a showy way, but in quiet moments. In shared glances across the coffee shop. In gentle touches as we passed on the slopes. In the way we helped others find their path. One evening, as summer painted the mountains in wildflower colors, Nathan finished his book. We celebrated on the deck, watching the sunset. It's different from the blog, he said. How so? It's not just about leaving anymore. It's about finding. Finding what? Home, he said, looking at me with those honest eyes. in the mountains, in myself, in you. I understood perfectly. Because I'd found home too. Not just in my lodge or in the mountains, but in this man who'd turned betrayal into blessing. Who'd chosen authenticity over appearance. Who'd reminded me that love isn't about perfection. It's about being real, being present, being true. The publisher loved the final manuscript. Said it would resonate with anyone feeling lost in the modern world. Anyone seeking something real in a virtual age. They were right. Advance orders started pouring in. But that didn't matter as much as what we'd built together. A life stripped of pretense. A love based on truth. A home in the mountains. Summer brought more changes. More guests seeking their own transformations. More stories of lives redirected. More moments of genuine connection. Nathan's divorce was finally settled. Ashley got the Bay Area house, half his tech savings. But Nathan got his freedom. And in losing everything, he'd found something better. Something real. We didn't need Silicon Valley success or social media validation. We had mountains and morning coffee. Ski lessons and sunset talks. Truth and trust and time together. That summer, as our lodge filled with people seeking their own fresh starts, I realized something profound. Sometimes the best stories aren't about dramatic endings. They're about quiet beginnings. About finding courage to start again. About choosing authenticity over artifice. About building something real in a world of filters and facades. That's what Nathan and I had done. And we were just getting started. The fall brought golden aspen leaves and life-changing decisions. Nathan's book hit the shelves in September, climbing bestseller lists quickly. The media attention was intense at first. Everyone wanted to interview the tech executive who'd walked away from it all. But we managed to keep our sanctuary intact. Declined the reality TV show offers. Turned down the influencer collaborations. Stayed true to what mattered: our life in the mountains. Tyler came to visit that October, his first time away from his gaming setup. He was awkward at first, uncomfortable without his usual digital shields. But something changed during that visit. Maybe it was the crisp mountain air. Or the way the aspens painted. The slopes gold. Or maybe it was seeing his father truly happy. "I get it now," he told Nathan one evening. "Get what?" "Why you left. Why you chose this." They spent hours talking by the fire pit. Father and son reconnecting without screens between them. Madison visited more frequently, bringing her own transformation stories. She'd started a small business at college. A company helping people disconnect from social media addiction. "You inspired me," she told her father. "Both of you did." The lodge evolved too. We added writing retreats to our digital detox programs. People came to tell their own stories of starting over. Of finding authenticity in an artificial world. Nathan led workshops sometimes, sharing his journey. But mostly he listened. Helped others find their voice. Their truth. Ashley reached out unexpectedly that November. Not to cause trouble, but to apologize. She'd read the published book. Seen herself through different eyes. "You were right," she wrote to Nathan. "We both got lost in that life. I'm finding my way back now." It was closure neither of them knew they needed. As winter approached, bringing the first snow, Nathan and I talked about our future. About making our partnership official. Not because we needed papers to prove our love, but because we wanted to celebrate choosing each other. choosing this life, this truth. We planned a small ceremony for December. Just family, close friends, and our mountain views. Madison helped with the arrangements. Tyler designed our wedding website. Both kids fully present in the moment. The ceremony was everything we hadn't known we wanted. Snow falling gently outside the lodge windows. Fairy lights twinkling in the rafters. Our guests present and engaged, phones tucked away. I wore a simple white dress. Nathan, a charcoal suit that matched the winter sky. We wrote our own vows. Promises to stay authentic. To choose each other every day. To keep building something real together. The reception was filled with laughter and stories. Dancing and genuine connection. No social media posts. No carefully curated moments. Just joy, pure and unfiltered. Later that night, watching the stars from our deck, Nathan pulled out a small notebook. "I've been writing something new," he said. "Not about leaving anymore. About staying. About building a life that doesn't need escaping." I understood perfectly. Because that's what we'd created together. A life stripped of pretense. Rich in meaning. Full of purpose. The new year brought fresh challenges and opportunities. More people seeking their own transformations. More stories waiting to be told. We expanded the lodge, thoughtfully. Added new programs, carefully. Always staying true to our core mission. Helping people disconnect to reconnect. Nathan's book inspired others to make bold changes. We heard from readers around the world. People choosing authenticity over our appearance. Truth over trending. Reality over filters. Our story became part of something bigger. A movement toward genuine living. Toward real connection. Toward lives worth living. Spring came again, completing our first full cycle together. The mountains shed their snow, revealing new growth. Like our love, always evolving. Always real. Tyler started college that fall. Computer science, but with a different perspective. "I want to create games that bring people together," he said. Not ones that isolate them. Madison's business grew. She became a voice for digital wellness. Speaking at conferences about finding balance. About her father's courage to start over. About the power of authentic living. Ashley found her own path too. Left the ER for a smaller practice. Found joy in simpler things. Sometimes healing comes in unexpected ways. For all of us. Looking back now, I marvel at how life unfolds. How my Olympic injury led me to build this lodge. How Nathan's betrayal led him to these mountains. How two broken paths converged into something beautiful. We still run the lodge together. Still help others find their way. Still choose each other every day. Still build something real in a world of artifice. Nathan still writes every morning in our coffee shop. I still teach skiing to those brave enough to try. We still watch the sunsets from our deck. Still find magic in mountain moments. Our story continues to unfold. Not in carefully curated posts. Not in filtered photos. But in real moments. True connections. Authentic living. Because sometimes the worst thing that happens to you leads you exactly where you need to be. To the person you need to meet. To the life you need to live. To the truth you need to tell. And that's a story worth sharing. End.